everyone. Hi. Hey, thank you for joining me today. I'm Kathleen, by the way, and today we're doing daffodils. Okay, so actually I haven't painted daffodils before, so this is the first time for me as well. So let's figure it out together. So, um, has anyone painted daffodils before? In any medium, doesn't have to be watercolor. So I don't know, I haven't painted it before, but yeah, they're actually very cheerful, very springy. So I figured perfect. Okay, so later I will be sharing the reference photo I used, so that you can use the same reference photo if you want. But of course, you don't have to, because you can totally use the same techniques using different reference photos for daffodils. Okay, but I'll share mine after the this live painting, and if you also want, I can also share a digital sketch so that you can save it. You can see how I sketch it out. You can trace it if you want, if you don't want to go sketch. So I'll share it later after the live painting. Okay, so today I've already pre-sketched it right here. So it's not too dark. It's not too dark. The lines are not too dark, but they're darker than how I would normally sketch. So again, as a reminder, if you have a kneaded eraser, go over it gently with your kneaded eraser to remove lines that are too deep or too hard, so that they don't show up after, especially if you don't like to see drawing lines in your final work. In my case, I don't mind, but if you do, then erase it before. Okay, so I'm gonna flip the camera down now and you'll see my desk. Okay, and let me flip this around. There you go. Okay, so here's my sketch as mentioned. Okay, let me just improve the lights a bit so that it's not too dark. Okay, there you go. Okay. All right, so this is a bigger paper, so I figured I can do two. So I'll show you the reference photo in a bit so that you can just see what I'll be painting. Okay, so this is what I picked because, well, there's so many different kinds of daffodils actually when I was looking, but I feel these two are perfect together. I see them mostly in when I was looking through the photos, so I'll do this two together. Okay, let's see if we can finish it without taking so long. Okay, so I'll set this aside. You won't see it while I'm working on it, but I will share again. I will share everything later. Okay, so here we go. Okay, let's set things up. So today I will be using colors from our two upcoming sets, new sets. They're not out yet, but I'm using them so that you can already check them out ahead of time and see how I use them. Okay, so I just picked the sets that have a couple of yellows so that I have choices. So here in Classico, I have the lemon yellow and the Hansa yellow medium. So as you can see, a cooler yellow and a warmer yellow. So you can actually mix them both to get something that's midway. So that's why this set is classical. You can just mix things up. But if you have other sets that you have already the colors prepared, you can use them too. So I just had this ready in case I needed an even warmer, more muted yellow, new gamboge, or if I wanted Hansa yellow light. But let's start with this set, and if I need, I can go to the other set. Okay, so let's see. And as usual, I have my scrap paper so I can test out my mixtures. Again, this is my first time to paint daffodils, so we're all be doing it together for the first time if it's your first time too. All right, so you can see me figure out what mixtures I should use. Okay, so let's see. Let's start, of course, always with our lightest. Okay, so let me just ready some brushes. I usually set aside a couple of different sized round brushes if I'm working on flowers that are more delicate, you know, more not too loose but not too realistic, then I would go for round brushes. Okay, so let's start with a bigger round brush because we're covering bigger areas now, so we don't need a small brush yet. Okay, so I'll start with this one because this one I won't be covering it so much because the petals are white, so the white will be the paper. So instead I will just add the shadows later in a different color. So we'll start with this one now, the yellow one on, oh, you can see it a bit. Okay, the yellow one right here. Okay, so I think for this the lemon yellow right here is perfect. Okay, you can even bring it closer to your, if you want, and you can just, you know, check if it's near it or not. Okay, if not, then you can mix to a color towards that. All right, so again, I'm just going to dip my brush in water, prepare the mixture right here. So I'm going to prepare a bit because I'm painting bigger now, just so I have enough color. And again, you should always try it out first to see if it's the color you're looking for, or maybe you're mixing something too dark. Okay, but remember, it will dry lighter, so something a bit darker than what you see here when wet, because it will dry lighter. Okay, so I think this is okay now, so I can go and apply it here. So you can, of course, paint this wet and wet, or you can paint it wet and dry. When I'm working with more detail, I tend to work wet on dry. Okay, let me zoom this in so that you can see nearer. Okay, there you go. Okay, so just let me know if you guys want it nearer or something. Okay, so I'll start. What I do is I start from here at the center, surrounding this center cone-ish shape. So I'll paint around it. I'll start my mixture here, pull it outwards, and then I'm going to dip my brush in water. Just dip the tip, nothing extreme. Okay, just to lighten it a bit. And then pull the color outwards. So now that you've dipped your brush in water, the color that you're pulling outwards will be lighter. So you have a slightly darker center. And if you want to darken it further, just drop in color, drop in your mixture again. Okay, and because you've wet it already, it's going to spread still a bit. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all the different shadows yet. Okay, I'm just getting the overall shade. Okay, so no extreme details yet, because you don't have to. If you don't want to later on, you don't have to do the veins. You can stop it at this. Okay, so next we'll work on all the petals. Okay, so I'll just go counterclockwise. Okay, so just the same technique. I'm just going to start here at the center and then pull it outwards. Center first, like a smaller triangle in the middle of the petal. Okay, so if your hands are a bit shaky, and then you want more control, just switch to a smaller brush than what I'm using. Again, dip your brush in water and start from the edges and pull it outwards. Okay, just keep dipping to make it lighter. Okay, so very easy. That's what I always do. I just dip my brush just to make it a bit lighter and then pull it outwards. So do this while the color that you applied at the center isn't dry yet, because if it's dry, it will leave lines at its edges. But if it's still wet, you can still move it. You can still make it you know, spread. So sometimes if you've done it, you know, you've tried it, and then you took your time, and then you will see an edge, and you will have edges. But if you don't mind the texture, it's not always a bad thing. Okay, so again, it is also a matter of preference. Okay, so now we have two down. So a bit of color bled here, so I'm just going to lift it and then wipe it on my paper towel. Okay, so later, I'm not going to erase the sketches so that you will see where I'm working. Okay, so next, again, just move around, no problem, just repeating the same technique. So actually, that's the thing with flowers, petals. A lot of the time, you're just going to do the same thing that you did for all the petals. Just slight variations here and there. If there's a little fold, or if there's more shadow, but generally the techniques are the same. Okay, so again, I start with my smaller petal shape at the center, dip my brush, and then move from the edges. Again, dip further to further lighten. Okay, so I just really dip the tip of my brush. I don't dunk my whole brush in. Okay, it's just like I'm adding water to the mixture that's in my brush. Okay, so you don't rinse off the color, but you lessen the intensity of the pigment in your brush. And then I will just drop in. Okay, so already it's not looking too flat. This is just the first layer, but because we did our technique like this, it's not coming out flat. So if you can do that already in the first layer, then it will lessen the effort that you need to do in the following layers. Okay, so let's just continue. I'm going to add a bit more mixture. Okay. So I really recommend that you have your two kinds of yellow, because well, it's hard to mix a lemon yellow if you need this bright yellow. Okay, and again, dip, spread the color outwards. Okay, so we'll probably do maybe 3 layers of this. One for the base color, and then another for the details, and then the shadows, another for the shadows. Okay, so I like it. It's a nice yellow. It's very, I also like how the color bled. It gives me a nice texture. Okay, so here, if you want to see closer, all right. So for me, I like the texture. So if you don't want texture like this, of course, you can always smoothen it. But for me, I like it because it makes it look more organic. Okay, so again, I have 2 other petals, so I'm just going to go and work on that. Hi, Joe. Well, not so much, but here are the daffodils, and I'm just doing the same technique for all the petals. So I start with this triangular-ish, it's like a smaller petal shape inside, and then I just dip my brush in the water and then spread it outwards so it gets lighter, because I keep adding water to my brush in small increments. Okay, so just dip the tip of your brush. You don't rinse the color out, just dilute it. Okay, and there you go. So last petal before I move on, because I'm going to wait for the outer petals first before I work on this bulb or this cone thing inside. I should probably learn my flower vocabulary. If you guys know, just tell me. I'm not I'm not well versed on the different parts of the flowers. I'm sure I learned this in school, but somehow my brain just forgot everything. Okay, so I'm applying again. Again, just repeating, very repetitive. So it can actually be very therapeutic. So the nice thing about this photo is the lighting is fairly balanced. So there's no extremely shadowed areas. So it's not too hard to work on this. If it's more dramatic, oh yes, I'll share it after. Okay, I made a sketch that you can use. It's just very simple, very just a line sketch. So I'm going to share it after this, and you can save it and use it as your guide or to trace it. Okay, and I'm sharing both this photo and the sketch of this photo. Okay, so now, okay, I'm done with the first layer. I'm going to leave this to dry, and then I'm going to move to this flower. Okay, so usually it's a bit tricky to paint white because how do you create the shadows for white? Okay, so many people have different ways of doing their shadows. Some do a more purple shadow, some a more bluish shadow, some gray. Okay, in my case, I'm going to do a kind of a gray but with a greenish um, tinge because, well, it's around greenery, so probably some of the green will reflect on the white of the petal. Okay, so when you have light colors, you also have to think about the colors surrounding it that may reflect on those lighter colors, especially white. Okay, so now let me just mix. Okay, I'm going to use the same yellow. Then I will add a little blue just to give it a sort of greenish tinge. Again, you can try it out with several blues and you pick the one that you like best. Okay, so don't make it too dark because, again, this is white. You don't want to overwhelm it. I'm going to add a little black just to give it that grayish tinge. Again, don't overdo it. Okay, so I'll set this aside and then I'll make another one, just blue and yellow, no black. Okay, so I'm using cerulean blue with lemon yellow. Is it pastel? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just preparing two that I can mix, but I also have separate. Okay, so again, just very pale. I'll start the same way at the center. Okay, let's make this even paler. I'm switching to a smaller brush so I can control it better. So starting here, then dip my brush like a lot, dip the whole brush because I want this to be just a very pale greenish wash. Okay, nothing too dark. Again, as much as possible, you want to keep the white of your um, petal. Okay, so if you want to go towards the purplish or bluish interpretation, go ahead. This is where you want to choose your own preference. Okay, that's your artistic license, so you don't have to follow the reference photo exactly. It's there to guide you and inspire you, but don't be too stressed over it. Okay, so in my case, I'm going for a greenish, slight greenish shadow. Okay, so I'm not covering the whole um, flower, the whole petal. I'm just brushing it in strokes. so that I can still see the white under. So it's like lines. Okay, so don't cover your white because you still want your white to show up because your petals are supposed to be white. Okay, so instead I'm doing lines, but white still showing. Okay, let me just bring this for mirror so you can see because it's really very pale. Okay, hope you can see it. Okay, so very, very pale green. It's not very clear, but in real life, it's there. Okay, so again, I'm going to do it for all the petals. Okay, so here I can apply it thicker, darker, because there is more shadow on this petal. And again, spread it outwards in strokes, not covering the whole flower. So again, this is just the first layer. So don't stress about getting everything done on the first layer. You will layer, so take your time. And you don't have to paint all the lines of the veins of the petals later on. Again, it is your choice and depending on how realistic you want to paint. Okay, so here it's also more shadowed along under the petals, overlapping it, so I can do that. So just go back and forth from your reference photo. Basically, I use it to guide my values and the tones that I need to prepare, but again, I'm not copying it 100%. Okay, and here too. So try to include if you see little folds, little curves like this, little folds on the side, because that's really going to help make your petals, your flower look more real instead of them all perfectly opening without any folds or anything. Okay, right. So there we have it. We're done on this side, first layer. Okay, so let's go back now to the other side and let's add the center. Okay, so this is the same yellow. Okay, it's still lemon yellow, but I'm going to add, let's see if I need to add a dash of Hansa just to make just a very light addition because I feel like it's a bit golden and not really lemon. Okay, again, you can always test it out on your, okay, and then you can bring it to your, you know, photo and check if it's along those lines, and I think so, so now I can use it. Okay, so for this, I'm going to paint this whole center this one color. Okay, so we'll work in layers. So let's just cover this in one color. So I'm using a smaller brush so that I can get the curls on the side, because I think that's what makes that's what will make your daffodil look like a daffodil if you get the little curls on the edge. So try to do that. Not to worry, I will share after the basic sketch that I did. So I hope it will help you out. So keep in mind, each flower has 6 petals. Okay, so there's 3 on top, overlapping another 3 below. Okay, so again, just paint all over, except for the tip right here where it's a bit lighter. So I'm just, right now, creating a circle around that to keep that white. But if you do paint over it, you can always lift it later. You can lift the color out Okay, so this nice bright yellow. So this is lemon yellow mixed with a dash of Hansa yellow medium. So that's why it has a little bit more golden color. So don't worry if it's not smooth, because this is your first layer. You will still add other layers on top, so don't worry about that. But try to get the little curls on the edges so that it really looks nice. Okay, almost done. And okay, so our daffodil is slowly coming together. Okay, we just need to add shadows, and then later on you have the option to add the veins or not. Okay, so let's move on to this one. Okay, so this one is I'll start with this same mix right here for my first layer, and then I'll layer a more yellow orange on top. Okay, so let's start with this golden yellow mix. I'll make it a bit more golden than this one. Okay, so again, you can always test it out. Okay, it's best to be a little paranoid just so you can still correct yourself if it's not something you like. Okay, so this will be yellow orange later on. So this is your first layer. And then for the center, I'm just going to apply a washed out. I added water to my brush. Okay. So you can use a bigger brush if it has a fine tip. Okay, feel free to do that. But if you can work quickly, even with a smaller brush, then this is fine. Okay, I'm just switching to a smaller brush now because I really want to get the little curls. Okay, so already with just the first layers done, you can already start to see the daffodil or the narcissus. Oh, and by the way, Theodora created a gouache daffodil tutorial. I think I shared it just last week, or yeah. So you can find it in the group. I added the link to the article if you want to check it out. So she made gouache roses, very easy, and of course the daffodil, more complicated, but she included a step-by-step. So if you guys also want to see how to paint this in gouache, then you can check that out. Okay, so now this is done, so we can go back to the other side. Okay, so what I do is I'm just going to go back and forth, and then wait for, while I'm working this, it gives the other one time to dry. Okay, so now I'm going to start with the shadows. Okay, so I'll start again with the outer. Okay, so let me just re-wet this. Add a bit more yellow. Okay, so let me add blue cerulean, which I will use for the shadows. Okay, so it's gonna be a little greenish. So again, it's up to you, but I prefer to use colors that are next to each other, so that the shadows don't look off. Okay, so if I use black, for example, to create the shadows, it's gonna make it too intense or even brown. So instead, I'm going to go with a more greenish shadow so that it's gonna blend well with the yellow of the flower because there are greenery around. Okay, so always go for try to go for a color that's next to your main color on the color wheel so that it's not going to look off. It will make it look more harmonious. Okay, so I'm just going to add some green strokes. Okay, dip my brush, soften it. So again, you can use a smaller brush for this. So I'm adding some texture. Again, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can just do a shadow instead. In my case, I'm just adding the strokes and then dipping my brush in water and just going over it to soften it. Okay, so that you don't have harsh lines that will be hard to correct. And I'm also going to add the green for the shadowed areas. Okay, so it will be here around this petal. Okay, like this and like this. Okay, so that's why I have several different green mixes so you can play around with them. So adding the shadows helps your flower have more volume. So now they're starting to look like they're on top of each other and not just side by side. Okay, so already you can see the division between the petals. So that's what we're looking for. So let's go over all the petals. Again, I'm gonna go back to my greenish shade and just apply it on the areas where I see there are deeper shadows. And just go over it with your wet brush on the edges to soften the lines. Okay, so that's what I do. I apply my shadow, and if I don't want it to have harsh lines, I go over it again with a wet brush on the edges. That way, you still have your shadow, but it doesn't look too stark. Unless, of course, it's a stark shadow, in which case, go ahead. Okay, so if it's a soft shadow, just go over the edges with a wet brush and it will soften the edges. Okay, so I'm using a cerulean blue so that it looks like a soft green, okay, not a dark green. I don't want to overwhelm the nice cheerful yellow. Okay, so there's a bit of a curl here, so I'm just slightly adding that. And you can always add more later. Okay, so around the edges, I will add bits of shadow. It will also help separate this bulb at the center from the petals under. Okay, and again, with my strokes, my lines, I'm going to add some texture. Okay, try to follow the shape of the petals. So if it's curving like this, also create your lines curving, not straight. That way they will look more natural. Okay, and then again, wet my brush and go over them to soften. Okay, so I get to create the texture at the same time, maintain the softness. Here I'm adding extra green because this is more shadowed. Okay, and again, I'm going to go under here because this petal is on top and this one is under, so it will have a little bit of shadow under. So nothing too extreme, okay? Always start with a lighter one because you can always add more. You can add another layer later on if you think it's too light or if it needs more. Okay, so this will take work, but again, it's still very repetitive. The same technique, the same process, but just, well, several petals. Okay, but really, if you break it down petal by petal, if you work at it petal by petal, it's so doable. Okay, so don't get overwhelmed by just looking at the complete picture. Just work on it slowly, step by step, and you'll be surprised you're finished. Okay, so now I'm adding this bright yellow on the edges of the petals right here. It's also going to help bring it forward. Okay, so not all the edges, just some of the edges. Okay, so now let's move on to the next petal. Okay, let's not take too much time. Okay, again, just the same strokes. Then wet your brush and then go over it with a wet brush to soften. Okay, and then add the shadow that you need. So here, there's a slightly deeper shadow, so let me just get this down. Okay, dip my brush and then go over the edges and pull it outwards. Okay, so now you have a soft shadow here. So this side is not soft because that's where the curl happens, but the edge of this should blend back to the petal, to the rest of the petal. Okay, so again, here under there will be more shadow, so just add those, but again, don't overdo it. You don't want to lose the nice yellow of the flower. Okay, so we will see. You don't have to follow what I'm doing exactly. If you see it different your own way, go ahead, right? So again, if we all look at the same view and we paint together, we will paint different things. Okay, so keep that in mind. There's no one way of painting things. If you're not doing it for botanical illustration or something, if we're not aiming for something that needs to be perfectly the same. Okay, so again, I'm going to add extra shadow right here under this petal. Okay, so now we have a lot of them down, okay, and this is what it looks like up close, okay, and farther. All right. So if you want to add more yellow, you can always, for example, if you feel like you find it too green or too shadowed, you can always just go and get your yellow and do yellow strokes on top, okay, to reawaken the yellow, like this. All right, so let's do that for all this. I actually like it because the streaks of green and yellow just go well together. Or if you don't want to paint the lines, the texture, you can always use colored pencils. Okay, you can use colored pencils to add the texture if you don't mind doing a little mixed media. But if you want to do all watercolor, then you can do something like this. Okay, All right, so next, um, wait, I forgot the edges. So the edges here also have a slight shadow. Okay. All right, so now let's go here. Okay, so this one, let's add a deeper yellow right here. So this is where the petal curved like twice. So you'll have two curves right here. So take your time. Okay, you can work petal by petal, take breaks. Again, I really recommend if you're waiting for things to dry, take a break or paint something else while you wait for your layers to dry so that you don't overwork things. Okay, so sometimes it's just your impatience. I know too well because I can be very impatient as well. So sometimes I just have something else on the side that I just quickly sketch or, just doodle just to stop myself from overworking what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm adding the divisions. Again, nothing too complicated. Okay, so now you can see it's like it's been squished a bit. That's why it's folded like so instead of opening like this. So the petal folded like this. Okay, but just at the edge. And then now I'm going to add the yellow outer layer. Based on my reference photo, it has like a bright yellow edge. So I'm just going to add that. Okay, so really, if you've prepared your mixtures, then everything will be so much easier. Okay, so you can also plan it ahead of time. Take your time, plan your colors, test them out against each other, see if you like what you've prepared. Okay, I'm adding extra shadow here where they all merge. Okay, so take your time when you do this because you can wait for it to dry and then see later on if maybe it needs more or not. So at least you don't end up with an overworked flower. Okay, so let's move around. Again, with the lines. Here it's a bit lighter on this side, so I'm not going to do that there. I don't want to overwhelm. So also pay attention to where the source of light is because those areas will be lighter. But this one is not too extreme. So this is like under the sunlight, so it's a more balanced um, source of light. Okay, and then I'm going to use yellow to do the strokes. So this one has more bright light on it, so it has less shadows. So just the shadow on one side, but for the other side, I'm just using a more deeper mix of the yellow to add the texture. And again, add the bright yellow edges. So it's not the whole edge, it's more like here in the center. Okay, so the inner center. Okay. And then I'm just softening it so it's not too stark. Okay, and final one. Okay, so final one. There's a petal on top of it, so I can do this with more strokes under. It will certainly be more shadowed because it's under another petal. Okay, and again, go over it with a wet brush just to soften. If you feel like you have too much lines, you can always rub it gently, depending on the paper that you use. Okay, if you're using nice thick paper, then it can handle more abuse. Okay, and for this upper part, I'm just going to use the bright yellow to add the veins. Okay, and still soften it. Okay, so again, don't forget to add shadows where you see them, because that's really going to complete your work. It will separate all the different parts. Okay, so now it's not too wet, so I can work on the center. Okay, no problem. Okay, so let's start from the center here. Okay, so let's mix some yellow. Okay, so this is more brown. So let's mix some yellow with a bit of purple to create our brown. Okay, so again, you can test the brown that you're making if you like it or not. Okay, so yellow and purple. Let's see if I like this brown. So again, I'm using the yellow that I used here so that it's more harmonious than if I just use a random brown. Okay, so this is the brown that I created. Okay, looks nice. So let me just paint around the center. So there are tiny stalks inside, so I'm painting around them where I've marked. Okay, so don't paint over the stalks, the little stalks. Okay, paint a circular pattern around it, but not a perfect circle. Okay, try to follow the natural shape around this as well. Try to sort of mimic it irregular. Okay, and then dip your brush in the water and soften the edges. Okay, pull it outwards. If you feel like it's too light, just dip back on your mixture and add. So this part will have a very edgy part, and this one will blend towards the yellow. Okay, so keep dipping your brush in the water to soften the mixture and to dilute it as you move outwards. Okay, so this part with a nice clean edge, and this part getting softer. Okay, and then some parts will have, from the center, you just add your mixture and then pull it upwards. So creating like lines going outwards from the center. Okay, and once you have that, once you've softened it enough, then you have your shadow in the middle. So if you need to make it darker, wait for it to dry. You can add more later. So again, wait for things to dry so you can gauge it better. Okay, so because sometimes it was enough already, but you thought not, and you keep adding, and then before you know it, everything is a mess. Okay, so Also learn when to stop and take a break. Okay, I'm adding extra color here around this because this will be more shadowed. The inner parts will be more shadowed. And then I will just blend this inwards very slightly. I'm going to remove the edges here so it's not harsh. And there you go. Okay, so again, take your time. These are the little details that you really want to try to get, because you don't want them to look like a clump of whatever. So again, have patience and just try to do this. It just takes a little maneuvering and with a nice small brush, or a brush with a nice tip. Okay, so these brushes, they keep their tip well, so I can just keep using it. But if you started with floppier brushes, then you can switch to. Okay, so this one is too white, so I'm just gonna go and brush it lightly with color. Okay, so let's work on the curls. Okay, so I will use Hansa yellow, with lemon yellow, okay, and a bit of okay, just a bit of Hansa yellow. Let's see if I like it or if I need to add a bit of orange. Okay, so let's start with this. Okay, so let's go over our edge. So we have to add little shadows here and there to show that it's curling, it's not just open. So these are the folds, okay? So the more colors that you mix and you layer, then the better that your work will look, instead of just always using one color. Okay, so try to vary your mixtures because it will help make your work look more interesting. Okay, so here I'm just adding curls here and there, really just using my photo as a guide, but not being too worried about making things look exactly the same. As long as you get the general look of things, it'll look like a daffodil. Okay, so shadows here and there. So I'm overlapping it now with a brown. Okay, so this is Hansa yellow, and I'm mixing it towards the slightly greenish mix that I created earlier. Okay, so I'm really creating just little curls, gnarled curls. And adding here at the center as well, layering it over the brown. Slightly, not extreme. And again, you can always soften the ones that you feel are too stark, or you just want them to be a softer shade. You can just go over them with a wet brush and it will soften them. Okay, so don't worry, this color is not staining, so it's still very movable. So I'm just blending this out. Okay, and we're done with our first flower. Again, you can always add more um, color, more shadow if you want it to be even deeper. So let's do that just so we can see the difference if it's very shadowed. So again, I'm just mixing yellow and purple. Okay, so let me just, in between this pistils, is that, yeah, pistils, I will add just extra shadow to give it more oomph. When you have darker areas and lighter areas, when you have contrast, it really elevates the work. Okay, so don't be afraid to go towards the darker darks, because it's gonna help your work come together. Okay, so there, I've added it. And again, you can always lightly blend it if you want. So just don't overwork it, because remember, if you keep rubbing, you're also going to move the layers under. So you might ruin the work that you've done under. So just go over it lightly, limit the strokes that you need to use. Okay, so this is my first daffodil. Here you are. I hope you like it. I hope that was clear. So it's still very yellow and very cheery. And then let's go to the other one. Okay, so for this other one, I'm just going to go with this mix that I made earlier. Okay, let's make it a bit more purplish, slightly. So it doesn't look too dirty against the white. Okay, and now that we have this, we water it down further. Okay, and then we can add the little lines. For this, I will switch to a rigger brush, okay, so that I can really do the fine lines and not overwhelm the white. Okay, oh, thank you. I'm glad you like it. So we have one down. So this one is more white. So again, I made this more on the purplish side of brown and watered it down. And now let's test it. Okay, I always test, especially with the lighter lights, so that I don't end up with a too dark color. Okay, so let's just go over this with lines. Again, try to follow the shape of the flower. Don't make it too straight. Have little curves. So I'm just doing it at the center. Okay, so I'm sure you can already see it. And with a clean brush, I'm just going to go over it so that it's not too heavy. Okay, another way to do it, again, I mentioned earlier, is to use colored pencils if you don't mind going mixed media. Okay, so if you don't want to do the lines, you don't have to. You can just go for the shadows like this. Okay, add the shadows that you see. So here I'm leaving some of the edges with a white crisp edge because it's like the petal curved just a little bit. So there's a curl here and the edge is white. Okay, so pay attention to those little details because those really make a difference to the final look of your work. Okay, so for example, let's just go with a shading first. Okay, let's go over the shading that we need to do. Let's not add the lines yet. Or you can do something similar to this and just use a bigger brush to have bigger lines if you don't want to deal with tiny lines. Okay, so there are many ways to go about things, not just one, depending on the patience that you have, depending on what you want to achieve. Okay, so in this case, for example, I just went with a bigger-ish brush and just the general look of things. Okay, so again, instead of just using a pre-mixed brown, I mixed my own brown from the colors that I used, especially the yellow. So it really helps it look more cohesive. Okay, so try to mix the browns from the colors that you have, that you're using, and it really makes everything look so much better. Okay, so again, there's like a curl and another curl, very, very fine curl at the edge. So I'm just going over that and leaving a white edge. And here too. So the little details like this, for me, really help it look real. Okay, like everything is not perfect. Okay, so just go around and work on all your petals. Okay, depending on the shadows that you see, depending on the details, the curls. So try to pay attention to the little folds. Like here, for example, there's a fold here, there's a fold here, and there's shadow here, but not extremely here. And then try to always soften the edges of your shadows in your petals. Unless you see a hard edge, don't do a hard edge because it's going to make your petals look very stiff. Okay, and you don't want that. You want your petals to look soft. Okay, just adding. If you're really don't like what you ended up with and you lost your white, you can always go over it with a white gouache. Okay, again, if you have no problem with mixed media, there's always white gouache to rescue things. Or if you have watercolor ground, you can cover some areas with watercolor ground and start over those areas again. So there are still solutions, not to worry. Okay, but always go for a lighter mix so that you have the opportunity to layer instead of trying to save things. Okay, so let's just finish all the petals. Okay, let me do my lines. So instead of just applying a one chunk of shadow, I do the lines instead. In that way, they're not looking too heavy. There's breathing room in between the shadow, allowing also the white to show through. Okay. So your nice round brushes are really very versatile. Just, if you use them often, you'll find ways to twist them around to make them work for you. Okay, so I'm also adding the shadows lightly over those under the petals that overlap other petals. Again, don't overdo this, especially with the white flowers. Just little suggestions here and there. Okay, last two, and then we'll start in the middle. So I'm just checking every now and then my reference, but again, nothing too extreme. Okay, so here there is a nice curl, so I want to keep that nice white edge, so I'm going to go over under it. Okay, and then okay, soften the edge. Okay, and since this petal is on top of this yellow petal, some of the yellow from under is showing through. So now I'm going to just dab a little bit of yellow on top. Okay, so you have to also think about these things. There will be a color transfer, a color reflection, especially around lighter colors. Okay, so it's like also with people, if the person you're wearing is you're painting is wearing a red shirt, some of the red will also reflect on the skin. So uh, that's how the reflection works. Okay, so next, the final flower under. This is the most shadowed, so I can just relax here and just do my shadowing. Okay, so this is under two petals. This one, this, well, three. So that's why I can be more heavy with my shadowing. But still going for the strokes so that I can still have some white showing through. Okay, and now the area around here has some yellow from this flower. So again, I'm going to add yellow here. Okay, so there will always be little color transfers, little reflected light, reflected color. So just try to keep an eye out for those because they also help with, you know, everything with the volume, with the depth. It gives your work more depth. And again, work with lighter layers. You can always add more if you feel like you need more later. Okay, don't overdo things. It's very hard to erase watercolor mistakes. Okay, so color transfers here, and very light here, just a tinge. Okay, so now let's work on the edge. Finally, we're getting there. This will look so much better when you finish it with the background because this is white, so usually white would look best with a darker background than it is. Okay, but we don't have time for that. We'll just do the flowers. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to mix my Hansa yellow medium, okay, with um, pearl orange. Okay, so we're going for a more orange color now for the edges. Okay, but it's not as orange as this, so we'll soften it with a bit of the Hansa. Okay, so now let's go over the same thing that we did here. Okay, let's start from the edges. So we're not going to curl around the edges. We're just going to add little dots here and little strokes. So it's like little lines will go inwards. And different lengths, different curves. Okay, so not all straight. A lot of them are actually crooked. So try to vary your lines, and it will really help make everything make everything look better. Okay, so they're all going towards the center. Okay, so try to create lines that move towards the center. So don't edge the whole edge with just orange, especially here on the outwards. Here on the inwards, in the inner part, you can. Okay, because this part is more vertical, while this part is more so it's looking like this. So this part, you will see the folds more clearly, while this part, you just see the edges more. Okay, so here, the orange around is more evident. Though I'm still going to add breaks here and there of yellow. And the same idea with strokes going inwards towards the center. Okay, and then you can just water down your mixture and go over the edges with a more watered down orange and bring it in. Okay, so now you have lines that are darker, lines that are softer, so it looks more natural, looks more real, instead of just having one kind of lines or one kind of saturation of the lines. Okay, so try to create different values, even if it's just one color now. But because we used a yellow under earlier, it really helped with the volume, the layering. So we'll still allow a lot of the yellow that we used to show through. So some parts have a deeper orange, so I'm just going to add that. But otherwise, I'm just going to keep adding my lines going in. Okay, so this part is more orange now, so I can just go over it with a more pale orange wash, like this. Just keeping the tips a lighter yellow. Okay, so up to here you have an orange wash, and here as well. Allow some of the yellow to show through here and there, pops of the yellow background. It will really give it more depth. Okay, just adding more concentrated areas here and there. Okay, so now it's starting to really look finished. Okay, so let me just go ahead and mix this orange with the blue. Okay, so if you mix blue and orange, you also get a kind of brown. All right, or if you have a really deeper brown, you can also go with that. Okay, so let's see. You have your orange, Let's go for a deeper blue so we can have a darker brown. Let's try ultramarine. Okay, so that's the nice thing about browns too, is that you can mix your own kind of brown, okay, depending on what you're looking for. But you can also have a pre-mixed brown. Burnt umber is always a good one to have around because you don't have to keep on mixing. Okay, so if you have that, for example, I have raw umber, I can also add it to my mixture. Okay, so you can again do the same thing you did here. Curl the shadow around the pistils. Thank you for informing me. Okay, so I have the lines that I've pre-drawn, so I'm just going around them. So again, not too perfectly circular shapes, circular-ish, but trying to also follow the curves here. Going around. Okay, and then dipping my brush and then pulling the color outwards here to soften them. Okay, so keep rinsing your brush if it feels like it's too dirty or too saturated with the color. Just dip it in water and remove some pigment. Okay, so you'll have more control over your mixture. And then go over the edge again. Okay, and then you can always add more layers later on. As much as possible, I don't like to use black because it kills the flower. So you can also mix burnt umber or raw umber with ultramarine blue to create a deeper brown. Okay, so it's like a brownish, blackish color that's not dead, because sometimes black can make things look dead. Okay, so if you have your burnt umber or raw umber, you can use that. Burnt umber will be better. And ultramarine, you can create your own kind of deep color. Okay, so I'm going to do that here. This is raw umber with ultramarine. So it gives me a very, very deep brown instead of a dead black. Okay, so you won't really have a black shadow unless there's no light. Okay, so most of that will be very deep brown or very deep gray. Okay, so try not to use black because it's rare to have a black shadow. Okay, so that's the one thing that I learned from my teachers is if you look at things closely, most of the shadows are really deep gray or deep brown because of course there's still some sunlight, so it's not completely black. Okay, and now it looks so much better. I'm just going to trace around lightly around the shapes. You don't have to trace everything, just suggestive lines here and there. And your eye just somehow completes it. Okay? So nothing has to be extremely detailed. Okay, and this is a bit orange, so let me just go over it. Or maybe, okay, let's do the same mix of Hansa and the orange. Okay, but washed out. And let's go over this. You can always add the little dots if you really want to be hyper detailed later on. But in my case, I'm okay with this. I don't need it to be extremely detailed. I'm just adding the extra shadows here and there. Okay, so try to slightly, very slightly, pull it outwards. Again, you don't want it to be too dark. Okay, so now here are my flowers. You can always add more shadows if you feel like you need more shadows here and there. For example, here I feel like this one needs more separation from the petal under, so I can do that. I can add it. Okay, so just again, if you're not sure yet, take a break so that you'll have time to think things through and not ruin things, basically. Okay, I'm also going to add here just to help separate the petals, the top petals from the bottom trio. Okay, so it's like 3 on top and 3 below. So this is how the petals look like. So 3 on top of the 3 below. Okay, so here are my daffodils. Okay, so I hope I'll just bring it closer so you can see it better. Okay, so here are my 2 daffodils, one more on the yellow, bright yellow ones, and here is the whiter one with a very bright yellow-orange middle. Okay, so again, white flowers would look great against a darker background because, of course, it allows it to become even whiter. Okay, right now it looks like it's grayish, but it's actually what it looks like on the reference photo. It's not really white. Okay, as you can see. But again, you don't want to grade out so much, which is why I used first a kind of mixed shade, a kind of purplish shade. Okay, that I started with a very pale green, very pale, and then I mixed my own purplish brown gray for the darker shadows. And then again, don't forget to add the reflected color. Okay, there will always be reflected color, especially on lighter colors. Okay, so I hope you try this out, guys. It's really nice, and the curls, they seem like they're so challenging, but actually just try to get the wiggly lines going in, make it wiggly so it's more real looking, and it really will help make the center look like it's, you know, like this curled. Okay, so I hope you try this out. I'm going to flip back now to my face and zoom out. Okay, so these are my flowers, nice and pretty. If you add, of course, it's gonna look so much better with greenery, but that's so much easier, and I bet that's not the challenge really, so it's the flowers. So I hope you guys do it. It's perfect for spring while it's still spring. I'll try to finish this with a darker background so that we'll see the flowers better. After this live, I will share the photo and the sketch here in the event. So just look for it there, and you'll find these. Okay, so if you did try it out, please do share it with everyone so we'll get to appreciate all your hard work, because it is a lot of hard work, but I can say truly worth it. Okay, so thank you for joining me, guys, and I hope to see you on the next time as well. And if you have suggestions, something spring themed, something along the lines of spring, if you have, because this is from Sarah, actually, she mentioned daffodils, and wow, yeah, we can do daffodils next time. So if you guys have any suggestions or ideas that you want to try out, you want to see me do, just let me know anytime on the group, and I'll try to do it. Okay, so bye.